Good morning, everyone. Hello, Ella, and hello to the invisible viewers. And good morning, Bante. Hello, Yanni and Jens. Good to see you online. So this morning, hello, Nora. A few other friends are joining us. So Bante, if you want to share what we'll be exploring this morning.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, the theme of this retreat is recognizing impermanence. So practicing anicca sanya. And as I've mentioned a number of times, this is one of the methods for attaining awakening that the Buddha spoke about the most often. So the two methods that the Buddha spoke about the most are recognizing impermanence and contemplating non-self. So these are two methods which he said lead directly to full enlightenment. And of these two, recognizing impermanence is a little bit easier. It's a little more straightforward. And for the first 2 days of this retreat, so yesterday and the day before, we were emphasizing developing samadhi. So practicing mindfulness of the body, building up a strong, clear, intense awareness of the body, stabilizing the mind, steadying the mind, bringing body and mind to stillness. So a bright, awake, alert stillness. And this is very important because when the mind is very still and very alert, then it can much more easily see things as they really are. So it's not so easy to practice any form of insight meditation when one's mind is not stable. And if one's mind doesn't have sufficient alertness and clarity, similarly, any practice of insight meditation is not going to be very effective. So the strength of one's insight practice depends upon the strength of one's samadhi. The better your samadhi is, the better your insight practice will be. So there's this very commonly referenced sutta, the Yogananda Sutta, in which the Buddha speaks about the relationship between samadhi and vipassana. And in that sutta, the Buddha gives 3 strategies or 3 ways of developing one's practice. The first way is to start by developing samadhi. Then after the mind is well stabilized, well unified, bright, clear, alert, then one practices vipassana. And the second method he gives is first one practices vipassana for a little while until one's mind starts to settle down a little bit. Then one switches to samadhi and focuses on samadhi until one's mind becomes very well unified, very stable, steady, and clear. Then one returns to vipassana. And the third strategy he gives is to simultaneously develop both samadhi and vipassana in equal measure. So of these 3 methods, you'll notice that all 3 of them incorporate strong samadhi. And in fact, there's not a tremendous difference between these 3 approaches. There's not a huge difference between these 3 approaches. So I usually emphasize the first approach because 1, it works for me, and 2, throughout Buddhist history, this has been the approach that's been the most heavily emphasized in the Theravada world. The Mahayana world has tended to place more emphasis on the third method, by the way, the simultaneous samadhi and vipassana approach, which is also perfectly valid. and can be very effective if done correctly. The Theravada world has mostly emphasized the first approach, which is starting with developing strong samadhi, and then after one has strong samadhi, then switching to practicing vipassana. In recent times, in the last 100 years or so, there has started to emerge a mm, movement which calls itself dry vipassana, which is trying to practice only vipassana and not do samadhi at all. I don't know where they're getting this from because it's not in the suttas. And it doesn't seem like something that lines up with the strategies the Buddha recommended. Because even when the Buddha recommended an approach that starts with vipassana, the idea is that one is just doing vipassana to start to collect the mind together. So this approach is useful for people who are very scatter-minded or have very active thinking or get really bored with samadhi practice, or who find samadhi practice really difficult or uninteresting or unappealing, but who find the vipassana meditation practices more interesting. So for people with that temperament, then starting with vipassana, you're giving the mind something to do, something a bit more interesting perhaps than samadhi, but which still has clear limits and boundaries. So you'll start to develop a certain small amount of samadhi, not much, but you'll get a little bit of samadhi, and you'll start to train your mind to stay within boundaries, so that then, after doing vipassana for a little while, then you can carry on with the normal strategy of developing strong samadhi, then practicing vipassana. So that, again, it's not such a dramatically different approach. It's just using a little bit of vipassana in the beginning to kind of prime the mind, to get the mind ready for samadhi. But it still winds up being the same approach of first developing strong samadhi and then practicing vipassana. So in theory, today we've all spent the last 2 days developing samadhi, focusing on mindfulness of the body as a way of collecting together the mind, unifying the mind, cutting off our old habits of unnecessary thinking, unnecessary worrying, letting go of all extraneous mental activities, and just learning how to hold the mind still, learning how to keep the mind still and clearly aware. So today, I'd like to recommend that you start incorporating the recognition of impermanence into your practice. And based on the questions that we've been getting, I suspect that some of you have been doing this anyway already, which is okay, but you really need to ask yourself, how strong is your samadhi? If your samadhi is weak, then your recognition of impermanence will not go very far. It will be shallow. It will be incomplete. It won't make a significant change in how you experience the world. Whereas if your samadhi is very strong, very deep, very powerful, then your recognition of impermanence will be correspondingly strong and deep and powerful. And it can completely alter the way you perceive your body and mind. So develop your samadhi. Really take the time and effort to develop mindfulness and samadhi, to develop equanimity with clear awareness. So holding the mind steady on the body until all the unnecessary mental activity fades away. And one is able to maintain continuous awareness, continuous, sharp, clear awareness of the body, at least for several minutes. At a minimum, for several minutes. And one of the techniques I've been recommending lately, which I find very helpful, is to perceive the body sensations as pleasant. So to direct attention to the pleasantness of the body. So really enjoying the experience of the body, perceiving it as pleasant, cultivating and building up that sense of euphoria in the body. So this is the quality that in Piti is called, in Pali, it's called Piti. So Piti means euphoria or rapture or ecstasy. Sometimes you'll see it translated as bliss or joy. Bliss is okay. Joy, I feel like, kind of misses it a little bit. Piti, the feeling is more like euphoria. So this very pleasant feeling all through the body. And it's something which you can actively cultivate, something you can actively bring up in your experience, something you can actively develop. And as you actively develop the feeling of euphoria, the feeling of ecstasy, the feeling of physical pleasantness all through the body, the stronger that gets, then generally speaking, the stronger your samadhi will get. So piti, this quality of euphoria or rapture or ecstasy, directly supports the development of samadhi. It's one of the characteristics of first and second jhana, and in fact, it's usually the most obvious characteristic of first jhana in particular. The most obvious characteristic is this incredibly strong whole body euphoria. It's unmistakable. Can't miss it. Piti is also one of the 7 factors of awakening. It's one of the 7 bojjhangas. So this quality of euphoria, of physical pleasantness, is not just an aspect of samadhi, it's also an aspect of awakening. It's something which is conducive to awakening, conducive to enlightenment. So it's not to be dismissed, it's not to be set aside. I've met far too many Vipassana practitioners who approach their practice with this very grim, harsh, determined way of like, I will endure this horrible experience until one day I break through to full enlightenment. And you can practice in that way if you want, and it's going to fail and you're going to hate it every moment of the way. But if that's really what you want to do, I can't stop you. But what I would encourage you to consider is that perhaps that wasn't what the Buddha was talking about. Perhaps the Buddha was not recommending that we do this painful, horrible drudgery of slogging our way through misery. Maybe that wasn't actually what he was recommending. Instead, he spoke about euphoria as being an aspect of awakening. He spoke about developing jhana, which is marked by euphoria and happiness and tranquility. So these are supportive conditions for the developing of insight, for the cultivation of this liberating wisdom. So really taking the time to bring up that sense of pleasantness in the body, and doing it right from the start of your meditation period, right from the start of your samadhi practice. This also helps to reduce the difficulties that you'll have with pain later on in the meditation period. If you develop a strong sense of euphoria in the body early on, then pain will occur less often, less intensely, and when it does come up, you can direct the mind back to the euphoria, and the pain will recede, will disappear. So once your mind is well stabilized in samadhi, then you can start directing it towards the recognition of impermanence. And this is done without moving the mind from its place. So if you're holding the mind steady on a certain part of your body, so in my case, that's usually the hands, holding the mind steady on my hands as they rest in my lap. For other people, some people have mentioned they're using their abdomen. Again, that's a perfectly fine place to center your attention. Other people use other parts of their body. People who are familiar with some of the traditional ways of breath meditation tend to center attention on their nostrils. It's also fine. Wherever you're holding your attention, heartbeat, some people mention their heartbeat. So holding attention in the upper chest area, that's also fine. Really anywhere in your body is fine. Also, holding the whole body as a single object is fine. Sometimes I find that having a small area of attention just isn't working for whatever reason, but that feeling the whole body as a single object is more effective. Um, so you might find that if you're really struggling with holding your attention on a small area, well, try just feeling the whole body all at once. Again, don't move the mind through the body. Just feel the whole body all at once. This can also be another way of dealing with pain, by the way. So if one is becoming so fixated on the points of pain that it seems overwhelming, then just feel your whole body, including the pain, but it puts the pain in context. You'll realize that most of your body actually feels fine. In fact, most of your body might even feel really nice, really good. There just happens to be some parts of it that feel kind of unpleasant, kind of painful, but it puts it in context. Kind of like if you put a spoonful of salt directly on your tongue, it burns. But if you put that spoonful of salt in a big pot of food, then actually the food tastes kind of good. Like there's no problem. The salt isn't a problem there. So it's the same. Like if you're fixating on the part of your body that's in pain, then it can seem like a lot. But if you're aware of your whole body, then the pain is just one small part of that whole body experience, which is overall pretty nice, possibly extremely pleasant if you've been developing the experience of euphoria, as I've been recommending. So that can also be a great way of helping deal with the issues of pain. Um, but anyway, regardless of where you're holding your attention, where you've been centering your attention in the body, whether it's a certain area, a small area, a big area, the whole body, a tiny point, whatever it is, don't move your mind from that area. Don't move your attention around while keeping the mind still and centered and unified, bright and alert and clear. Start to recognize that the sensations are constantly changing. That the sensations in the body are constantly changing moment by moment. So every moment, the sensations are appearing and disappearing, arising and ceasing, manifesting and vanishing, every moment. So there's nothing persistent that you can be aware of. There's just a domain of constantly appearing and disappearing sensations. A domain, a region of sensations constantly blinking in and out of existence. And not even appearing in the same way or the same place. It's more like static or sparks. If you've ever watched sparks coming off a grinding wheel, you've noticed that it's this constant, incredibly rapid field of little tiny points of light constantly appearing and then disappearing. But it's never the same moment by moment. It's always different. Every moment is different. Every moment is fresh. Every moment is new. So with the perception of impermanence, it's important to drop any expectation that the sensations that are going to arise will be anything like the sensations that you just experienced. So letting go of any expectation of how the body and mind is going to feel. And being completely open to the possibility that your body might be completely different this moment than it was a moment ago. It might be a completely different size, a completely different shape, a completely different temperature, a completely different experience altogether. Your body might even completely disappear, and that's okay. Your body might feel incredibly heavy or incredibly light. It might feel like air, or it might feel like stones. Doesn't matter, whatever it is, recognize that the experience is constantly changing. Recognize that there is no persistent solid object. There is just a constantly changing field of experience, constantly changing field of sensations. And recognizing that everything within that domain is insubstantial, like a mirage, like an illusion. It's hollow, empty. It's not quite real. There's something happening, but it's not quite real. So this is a recognition of the way things are. So anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence. So we're not changing reality. We're recognizing what's already going on. We're letting go of our delusional misperception of reality. We're letting go of our delusional concept of a persistent, ongoing, real, solid body. And we're recognizing what's actually happening. Therefore, it's called the recognition of impermanence, recognizing the truth of things, recognizing that there is nothing solid here. There is nothing persistent here. There is nothing substantial here. There is nothing real here. And yet, there is an experience. There is an experience, a physical experience, moment after moment. But what is it? As you develop this further, then you'll start to recognize that there are no edges to the body. There are no clearly defined edges to the body. So you also let go of any concept of the body as being separate from the outside world. You let go of any concept of any part of the body being separate from any other part. You let go of any concept of the body as being separate from the clothing or from the cushion you're sitting on or the building that you're in, the planet that you're on, the universe, the whole thing. You let go of any concept of separateness and you just open to the experience of impermanence, of insubstantiality, of emptiness. And as you progress with this farther, you'll also recognize that the boundary between body and mind is similarly insubstantial, unreal, an artificial projection of our own expectations. So you can let that melt away as well. And you can recognize that all the components of mind are similarly impermanent, insubstantial, constantly changing, illusory, mirage-like, hollow, empty, not quite real. And continue with this. Whenever you encounter solidity, whenever you encounter something that seems solid or real, look more closely. Recognize that it's changing. Recognize that it's impermanent. Recognize that it's insubstantial. Let it melt away. So our experience moment by moment is like a river, a flowing river. It's never the same moment by moment. There's nothing solid in there. It's all fluid. So anytime something solid seems to be present in our experience, that's because we're not paying enough attention. So turn towards it, look at it. Recognize it is impermanent. And recognize the attachment and grasping that we have, which is causing it to appear solid. Why do we perceive our body as a solid, persistent object? Because of our attachment to it. Because we're not willing to allow the body to disappear. We're not willing to allow the body to cease. That's why we have the experience of a persistent solid body, even though intellectually we know that's not true. So, being willing to let go of the body, being willing to allow the body to come to an end. And the same with the mind, with every object of mind, every process of mind, every aspect of mind. Be willing to allow it to change. Be willing to allow it to cease. Be willing to allow it to vanish. So, relinquishing our attachment to everything contained within body and mind. And this practice can go as deep as you want it to go, which is why it's a path to full awakening. Because you can keep taking this practice through deeper and deeper layers of the mind, more and more subtle layers of mind, deeper and deeper into the subconscious. Relinquishing the sense of self-identity in everything that we experience. Because in order to let go of something, you have to recognize that it's not who you are. Because if something is me, then we can't let go of it. If something is me, then we need to hold on to it. But when you recognize that something is not me, then you can let go of it. And when you let go of something, then you recognize that it's not me. It's not who I am. So as one develops the recognition of impermanence, it naturally becomes the recognition of not self. So we went through that when we spoke about the Meghiya Sutta the other day. The Buddha put it very simply. He said the recognition of impermanence naturally culminates in the recognition of not self. A very simple, direct statement. And that's the way of things. As we develop the recognition of impermanence, then naturally we start to let go of what we think we are. We start to let go of who we think we are. And we open up to the vastness of unrestricted potentiality. So what we call sunyata, what we call emptiness. So this is a brief overview of the perception of impermanence, the recognition of impermanence. And so I encourage you today to continue practicing samadhi, continue developing samadhi. And from time to time, when your mind is well stabilized, introduce the recognition of impermanence. Start to recognize that the body and everything within the body is constantly changing, insubstantial, hollow, empty, unreal. Recognize that any sense of division and boundary, any edge to the body, is similarly impermanent, insubstantial, hollow, empty, unreal. Recognize that the mind, all the contents of mind, are impermanent, insubstantial, hollow, empty, unreal. Every single thing within experience, impermanent, insubstantial, hollow, empty, unreal. So really cultivate this recognition. And if you start to get lost or spacey or distracted, then just come back to mindfulness of the body. And stabilize your attention through mindfulness of the body for a while, cultivating that sharp, steady awareness until you feel ready to plunge back into the maelstrom, to let the river start flowing again. And when you're ready, come back to that recognition of impermanence. Let everything solid melt away. Recognize that it was already molten. It was never solid in the first place. So I think that's all I have to say for now. If there's any questions, I'll go ahead and take questions. So you can type them in the YouTube live chat and I'll answer whatever is there. Okay.
Thank you, Bante. And good morning, Gita. who's asking, the second method from the sutra, actually not asking, she's making a comment. The second method from the sutra worked with me. I had studied the Dhamma and Vipassana, helped. Then I switched back to, well, it says Samantha, but I think that was an autocorrect of some Samatha. It was absolutely incredible, unbelievable stillness.
Yeah.
And Jens is asking, can I practice in this way? When focusing on the breath, I observe the cycle of wanting, breath, satisfaction, breathe in, dissatisfaction, and of inhalation, wanting, exhale. I watch as the pattern continues. Each breath is unique but follows the same pattern. I find it fascinating.
So I think that properly would be contemplation of the Four Noble Truths. It sounds to me like you're doing the practice of recognizing desire and the dukkha that comes from desire. So that is an interesting practice, but it's not the practice that I'm recommending during this retreat. During this retreat, I'm recommending practicing Samadhi and the recognition of impermanence. So I don't particularly recommend getting into contemplating desire and dukkha. While those are perfectly valid practices, those are insight meditation practices, by the way. While those are perfectly valid practices, they're not quite within the scope of the topic of this retreat. So I'd recommend that you save those until afterwards. So focus on Samadhi. If you're using your breath, well, develop Samadhi, focused on your breath. So pick an area of the body where you're watching the breath. Hold your attention steady there, being fully aware of whatever sensations are coming and going in that area. Then when your mind is sufficiently stabilized in Samadhi, when your attention is bright and clear, you're fully, clearly aware of the body, using the breath as your anchor. The mind is silent and bright. Then recognize that the sensations are constantly changing. So the breath is particularly well suited for the recognition of impermanence because it's so obviously constantly changing. The body as a whole is also constantly changing, but it's a bit more subtle. Realistically, it's actually not that subtle. It's really obvious as soon as we look at it. But the breath is even more obviously changing. So it's an excellent bridge to practicing the recognition of impermanence. So in my experience, breath meditation is a bit less ideal for Samadhi, but a bit more suited to recognition of impermanence. So I really encourage you to try to stick to this practice and save the contemplation of desire and dukkha for another day. Okay.
Thank you. And Sally says, Bhante mentioned about mind, separate body and mind. How to separate the body and mind?
Don't, because they're not separate. Body and mind are not separate. We only think they're separate because we're delusional. Okay?
All right, that was the last question. So
that was
unless
easy.
something else is coming up, then maybe we can go to meditation practice.
Maybe I'll speak.
Oh, Ron has a question. How to recognize when it's samadhi? I feel sometimes I am sleeping.
Well, make sure your mind is very bright and alert. This is a really important quality in samadhi, is that the mind must be very awake, very alert. So dullness or sleepiness has a pleasantness and a peacefulness, which somewhat resembles samadhi, but it lacks that sharp, crystal clear awareness, that sharp, crystal clear alertness. So samadhi must be accompanied by this incredibly sharp, awake, alert state of mind. That's the main important thing to look for. Okay.
And he's asking, when I focus on my breath, I feel it at both my nose and stomach. Is that okay? Or should it just be at the nose or stomach rather than at both at the same time?
I would recommend that you have a single contiguous object, so not two separate areas, but one area. So in this case, if you want to be aware of both your nose and your stomach, then you should be aware of the entire area between nose and stomach, the whole area as a single object. That's what I would recommend. If you don't want to be aware of such a large area, then pick either the nose or the stomach, but not both. The mind cannot be centered on two things at the same time. It can only be centered on one thing at a time. Okay?
Sally says, why walking meditation is recommended more than yoga or qigong as meditation method? We can observe the body while exercise too.
You can, that's true. Walking meditation, though, has one great advantage, which is that it's repetitive. You're not doing anything different with the body moment by moment. You're just walking. That's it, just walking. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It's like breathing. It's a bit like breathing. In, out, in, out, in, out, in, out. So walking back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. So because it's extremely repetitive and uninteresting, then it's very conducive to steadying and stabilizing the mind. So any more active form of exercise, because there's more things going on, there's more opportunity for the mind to get distracted and caught up in what's happening. There's more opportunity for one to get caught up in wanting to do certain things. It's like, oh, well, I like this asana, but I want to do that asana. And I also want to try out that other one. And maybe today I'll do some headstands and maybe I'll even get into scorpion posture. I've been trying to do it for years. And very quickly you lose your samadhi because you're just thinking about which postures you want to do and which stretches you want to do and what you're going to try out today and what you're doing differently than what you did yesterday and if you're doing it right and all that. So the mind can very easily get lost. But with walking meditation, it's really simple. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Pause, turn around. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. Pause, turn around. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. It's boring as hell, and that's why it works. Because it doesn't give any space for your mind to run around. It doesn't give any excuse for your mind to run around. Your mind has only one option, which is to walk. That's it. And this is great because then the moment your mind starts to do anything else, you catch it immediately because it stands out. So walking meditation is much better for developing samadhi than yoga or other forms of exercise. If you don't like walking meditation, then you can do prostrations. You should still do walking meditation even if you don't like it, by the way. But prostrations are something, if you want something that's a little more vigorous and which moves the body in a different way, but which is still very meditative and conducive to samadhi, then do prostrations. And not just a few, I mean like continuously for at least 20 minutes. Okay? Anything else?
Yeah, actually quite a few questions popped up in the meanwhile. And Key was clarifying, yeah, I feel the breath moving from stomach to nose. And Mark is asking, so once this recognition of impermanence is achieved, what is one to do with one's life? Seems like this is where people differ. For example, Jesus, Mohammed, etc. I once read where a Buddhist monk said that once he achieved this parenthesis enlightenment, he felt that anything was possible, so he chose to help others.
Well, I don't understand what you're talking about, Jesus and Mohammed. But as far as a monk attaining awakening and choosing to help others, well, that's natural, actually. In the suttas, in countless places, the Buddha is very clear that the natural inclination of an arhat, of a fully enlightened being, is to be of benefit to others. Their natural tendency is compassion. So that's natural. That's to be expected. Yeah.
And Ethan is asking, Bante, I can usually get piti and calm to arise fairly reliably and easily. Good for you.
Good.
But not to a mind-blowingly strong level that I hear about. Is this just the way it goes for some people? Advice?
My advice is to keep building it up. Make sure the mind is very steady, very peaceful, very clear, very aware, and keep building up the intensity of that euphoria. Sometimes what happens is that as the euphoria starts to build, we start to get excited by it. And then that excitement itself prevents the mind from settling down. So you also need to make sure that your mind is very peaceful and serene as the euphoria builds. Otherwise, the excitement will prevent you from going deeper into samadhi. So you want to emphasize stillness of mind, first and foremost. That's the most important quality. Because actually, if you just focus on developing stillness of mind, then the euphoria will come up on its own. So actively pushing the euphoria to come up is a way that can accelerate your samadhi a bit, but you need to make sure that you're not agitating the mind in the process. Okay?
And Ron is asking, when you mean alertness, so like bodily feelings or sounds around outside, birds chirping, etc.?
Well, everything, but in particular with mindfulness of the body, it's particularly alert to the body, alert to the sensations of the body, clearly, precisely aware of the sensations of the body. Okay?
And Edward is saying, when I use the whole body as the object, I could feel the whole body breathing in and out, even through the clothes.
Yeah.
And Sally is asking, when Bante mentioned pain part, Bante said to observe the contact in the body. What does contact refer to? How to observe the contact?
Sensations. So sense contact means sensation, sensory experience. So just paying attention to the sensation, noticing the feeling, being fully, clearly aware of the sensation, with peacefulness, acceptance, equanimity, non-reactivity. Just knowing it's like this, and it's okay. There's no problem. Okay.
And I was saying, thank you for the guidance. It all seems so simple and so hard at the same time. Still hard to do.
Yeah.
Welcome to Buddhism. And Mehmet says, thank you, Bante. When you mentioned that you sometimes repeat two different phrases parallel at the same time to keep your mind busy and focused, isn't it centering the mind on two different things at the same time?
So that's a practice which I recommended for when your mind is absolutely filled with all kinds of unnecessary thinking and you're having a really hard time cutting through all of that noise. So having two separate repetitions going simultaneously is a fairly extreme, heavy-handed method. It's not something that you use when you're trying to cultivate refined attention. It's not something that you use when you're trying to cultivate strong samadhi. It's something that you use when your mind is so chaotic and overwhelmed with noise that you need to do whatever you have to do just to try to get the mind to settle down a little bit, just to try to get the mind to shut up just a little bit. Anything. So that's a fairly extreme method for extreme cases. It's not an ordinary everyday method. unless your ordinary everyday situation is an extreme mental chaos situation, then maybe it'll be your everyday method.
All right. And Sally's saying, I see, thank you, Bante. I see it's actually the mind craving for healthy and active, so like exercise.
Yeah, and it's fine to keep your body healthy, and some exercise can be a very important part of that. So you do it during the break times, but not during the meditation times. During the meditation, try to stick to sitting and walking. Okay.
Sally is also asking, can I just observe the pain, like the outside ankle part pains the most while lotus posture?
Yeah, you can observe the pain. Um, I will say if you're getting pain in your ankles, make sure that your feet are all the way up on your thighs so that the ankle is straight, so that the ankle is not bent at all. If your ankles are bent when you're doing full lotus, then that can cause problems over time. That's not good. It will also cause a lot of pain in your ankles when you meditate. So make sure your feet are all the way up on the opposite thigh so that the ankle is not bent, the ankle is straight. But yeah, you can focus on the point of pain if you like, as long as your attitude is one of curiosity and acceptance. So this is the secret to breaking through pain. Curiosity and acceptance. That will get you through. Okay.
And Jens is asking, how do we deal with the excitement when we experience piti? I find the mind does get excited and piti goes away like riding a bike with no hands. When you think about it, you wreck.
I remember one time when I was young, I was riding a bike with no hands, and I was so proud of myself. And then I hit a patch of sand, and yeah, I wrecked. It was not pretty. Not pretty. Anyway, what was the question?
How do we deal with the excitement when we experience piti? I find the mind does get excited, and piti does it away like riding a bike with no hands. When you think about it, you wreck.
Yeah, in that case, bring your mind back to focusing on peacefulness. That's the balance. If focusing on piti is making the mind too excited, too agitated, then focus on peacefulness instead. And that, so it's like this balance. So when the piti is making you too excited, you focus on peacefulness. But if the mind is starting to slip into dullness and you're starting to lose that sense of euphoria, then bring it up again. And eventually you'll find that there is a place where the euphoria keeps building and building and building, and the peacefulness keeps getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And they're not disrupting each other at all. They just develop in tandem. Okay?
And Bradley is asking, sometimes I find that contemplating impermanence can leave me feeling detached/indifferent. Like thinking, well, everything is impermanent, so why bother with XYZ? How do I manage this?
Because you still experience cause and consequence. You still experience causality. Your choices produce effects. Your choices produce results. So we always have to be aware of both emptiness and form. You can't prioritize one over the other. So yeah, everything is impermanent, and yet the choices we make have consequences. So we need to be very careful to always make wholesome choices, good choices, wise choices. So this is one reason why compassion is such an important part of Buddhist practice, because it does help to prevent the mind from slipping into apathy or indifference or moral recklessness. Okay?
And Nora is asking, what do you mean by there being no division between your body and other objects, like on an atomic level?
You can look at it that way if you like. Um, so when you start getting into subatomic physics, then they say things which sound suspiciously Buddhist, like that there's not fundamentally any separation between different objects and so on. Um, so you can approach it that from that angle if you like, but really what we're talking about is experience. So start by developing the recognition of impermanence within the experience of the body, the domain of the body. And once you have that well established, then bring it to where you think the edge of your body is. And you'll recognize that what you think the edge of your body is also impermanent, is also insubstantial, which means you can't actually find a clear line that separates your body from the outside world. Just cannot find it. All you find is a domain of constantly changing sensations. That's all. You don't find a clear line dividing inside and outside. But don't take my word for it. Explore it. See what happens.
And Sally is describing the way she's meditating. Ankle all the way up to thigh, not bend. Then the bones really push thigh hardly. I guess that's better than ankle being bent and hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you get used to it eventually. Another thing that you can do is to put a pad of cloth between your foot and your ankle to cushion it a little bit, or like a blanket, a thin blanket, or a towel or something, just a little extra cushioning. That can be fine. Sometimes you can actually find a way to arrange your clothing, whatever you're already wearing. You can arrange your clothing in a way that helps to cushion your bones a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite skinny and bony, so I can totally relate to the awkward uncomfortableness of bones pressing into flesh. So I totally understand. So people who have a little more body mass, they actually have a bit of a bonus in meditation, and that they don't get the whole bones poking into flesh experience. So I find this interesting. Every now and then, people who do have a little more flesh on their bones, so to speak, they think that it's a bad thing for meditation, but it's actually the opposite. It's actually helpful because it helps to cushion your body more, so that you experience a bit less discomfort. But us bony types, we just have to learn how to deal with the pain of bones digging into flesh. So you can pad it a little bit with some cloth or a blanket or something, but otherwise you're just going to have to learn equanimity. Sorry.
Oh, she says, I need to add weight for meditation. Oh. So cute. Okay, well, that's all for this morning. That's all the questions. So then probably now another one is going to appear because I said it's all for tonight. Bradley says delusional type, aversive type, greedy type, bony type. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay, so please continue with your practice. So walking meditation, sitting meditation, you can go until 11 o'clock and then take a break. Can do a bit of work meditation. So do a little bit of house cleaning, make yourself a nice lunch. Then you can do eating meditation. So mindfully, peacefully eating your lunch while being clearly aware of your body. Then you can take a break. Try to keep mindfulness of your body during the break time as well. So not spacing out or thinking about random things, but remain peacefully aware of your body. Even if you go to rest, be aware of your body as it's resting. Then resume again in the afternoon, practicing sitting meditation, walking meditation. Take a break at 5, resume practicing, sitting and walking, and we'll see you again at 7:30. Okay?
right? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.